In the early hush that settles over a mountain range before sunrise, when the world has not yet remembered its noise, there is a kind of silence that feels ancient. It's the silence of stone, of wind carving through ridges, of snowfields holding the cold breath of the night. And somewhere in that silence, moving with the calm purpose of someone who has spent his entire life listening to the language of the high places, is Kilian Jornet, 37 years old, a runner who has become more than an athlete. A symbol of what happens when a human being commits to exploring the fragile boundary between effort and transcendence. To talk about Kilian is to talk about a lifelong apprenticeship to nature. His footsteps have traced the spines of continents, his lungs shaped by altitude, his mind sharpened by solitude. But this latest project, this audacious crossing of 72 summits above 14,000 feet in the continental United States, stands as one of the purest expressions of his philosophy. No engines, no shortcuts, only a bicycle, his own legs and the vast geography of America rising and falling beneath him. Over 31 days, he crossed landscapes that seemed to belong to different worlds. The serrated ridgelines of Colorado's Rockies, the arid basins of Nevada where the horizon wavers with heat, the granite architecture of California's Sierra Nevada, the icy, volatile heights of Washington State, more than 5,000 kilometers under his feet and wheels, more than 123,000 meters of climbing. Enough vertical ascent to climb Everest more than 14 times. Yet numbers as staggering as they seem are only the bones of the story. The real story lies in the hours between summits, in the quiet battles fought deep inside the mind, and in the relentless conversation between the body and the mountain. Kilian approaches the natural world with reverence, not as a battlefield to conquer, but as a partner that demands respect. On the ascent of Mount Rainier, the final summit of his journey, there were no dramatic announcements or triumphant shouts. Instead, there was a breath, a pause, a moment in which he could feel the weight of the previous weeks dissolving into the thin air. The mountain didn't care that it was number 72. The mountain simply existed, and Kilian, as always, adapted to its mood. In interviews afterward, he spoke not of domination or victory, but of understanding risk, understanding that life itself becomes small when we try too hard to shield ourselves from uncertainty. He believes deeply that our modern world, in its attempt to eliminate danger, has also eliminated many of the experiences that teach us resilience. We have created a culture where falling is seen as failure rather than instruction, where hardship is something to be avoided rather than integrated into growth. If children never learn that their choices carry consequences, he says, then adults will struggle to navigate the real risks they encounter. Strength comes from friction, wisdom from exposure. During his project, he relied not on predictions, but on adaptability. He describes this as carrying a toolbox. Not a literal one, but a collection of mental, emotional, and physical skills, shaped over decades of moving through unpredictable terrain. When a storm rolled in unexpectedly, when the trail vanished beneath loose rock, when fatigue tightened around his ribs like a slow compression, he reached into that toolbox. He didn't need to foresee the problem. He needed only to face it when it arrived. That, he says, is the essence of endurance. He has shaped his life around this principle. In recent years, he has stripped away much of the noise that surrounds elite athletes. Less travel, less stress, more sleep, more mindful training, more alignment between what he does and why he does it. He says that the foundation of all performance is health, not the temporary, fragile kind, but the kind built through years of respecting the body's rhythms. Because only when the body is cared for can it carry the mind across 31 days of mountains without breaking. But even with strength and experience, there were moments on the journey when solitude pressed heavily against him. Moments when the heat of Nevada felt like a hand on his back, pushing him into the dust. Moments when a ridge in the Sierra Nevada narrowed into something that resembled a blade more than a trail. Moments when his bike rolled across endless miles of wind-hardened plain, and the mountains ahead looked impossibly far away. Still, he moved, step by step, pedal by pedal, breath by breath. Because in those moments, discomfort becomes a teacher, and persistence becomes a quiet form of devotion. As he traveled from state to state, the landscape reshaped him. The Rockies demanded patience, their altitude forcing slow, deliberate breathing. The desert tested his mental discipline, its silence amplifying every doubt. The Sierra Nevada challenged his legs with steep, relentless climbs, while Washington's glaciated terrain reminded him that nature does not compromise. Each environment was a question, and each time he answered with humility. And within this vast continental journey, there was another journey, more intimate, softer, rooted not in ambition, but in love. He speaks often about his two daughters, about how children naturally understand movement better than adults. They don't walk, he says. They run, they stop, they explore. They move because movement is joy. He doesn't push them into competition or structure. Instead, he brings them into the mountains simply because that is the life he knows, and they seem to love it. Through them, he is reminded that the outdoors is not just a proving ground. It is a place of play, of wonder, of curiosity, a place where fear and excitement coexist. Ultimately, what makes Kilian's story powerful is not the record-setting mileage or the list of summits. It's the philosophy that threads through his life like a narrow trail across a ridge. He believes that effort should be rooted in respect for the fragile machinery of the human body, for the ecosystems that shape the landscapes he runs through, and for the planet that sustains all of it. His athletic achievements are extraordinary, but they are expressions of a deeper truth, that endurance is most meaningful when it is connected to purpose. As the days accumulated, exhaustion evolved into a kind of stillness, a clarity that arrives only when the mind has been emptied of everything unnecessary. On long bike stretches, he watched shadows lengthen across valleys. On early morning climbs, he felt the cold cut through his gloves and into his fingertips. He learned again and again that solitude is not something to fear. Solitude is where you meet the quietest parts of yourself. On the final climb up Rainier, the wind lifted snow in swirling patterns around him. The sky was a pale, shifting gray. His legs were heavy, but his mind was calm. And when he stepped onto the summit, there was no need for applause. The mountains stood silent. Kilian stood silent, and in that shared silence, there was understanding. Because the point of a journey like this is not to stand on 72 peaks. It is to discover who you become along the way, confront uncertainty without turning away, to find the thin line where fear transforms into focus, to learn that risk, when met with preparation and humility, becomes a path toward self-knowledge. Kilian's crossing of America's highest summits is a reminder that life shrinks when we try too hard to make it safe, that the human spirit was built to stretch itself across wild terrain, to test limits not out of arrogance but out of curiosity. He teaches us that resilience is not something inherited. It is something forged in cold wind, steep trails, long days, and honest effort. As the light fades across the mountain ranges he traversed, Colorado's jagged silhouettes, Nevada's desert shadows, California's granite towers, Washington's icy crowns, a truth settles like dusk. The mountains do not measure us by our speed or our strength. They measure us by our willingness to show up with respect, to move with intention, to embrace the unknown. And through that journey, through risk, through solitude, through unfiltered effort, Kilian Jornet has become not just a runner, but an example, a reminder that the world is still wide, still wild, still capable of teaching us who we are when we dare to step into its vastness.